how it all turns out. Currently, the UN apparently is on a track to declare a Palestinian state unilaterally in September. And I would like to know if your thoughts on whether you think they'll pull the trigger on that. And two, how do you see our administration responding to that? And three is, how does the Israeli administration respond, if not preemptively strike? What are their, what are they faced with? So.
You may not have been here Thursday night when I spoke. I am bitterly opposed to the no-fly zone in Libya. I'm opposed to it for a variety of reasons, and I think Alan articulated it very well. We responded to an international request for the use of U.S. military force without going back to our own government. And as Alan was saying earlier, we the people, we're the government. But we were not asked for our consent, again, consent of the government, to commit U.S. military force. Now you may say, well, none of our people were in harm's way. When you commit military, you are in harm's way. Period. It doesn't matter whether it's under Chapter 6 or Chapter 7 of the UN Charter, peacekeeping or peacemaking, it doesn't matter. You're in harm's way. So we responded to an international request by a group of people, that being the European Union, who have drawn down their defense spending for decades with the full expectation that the American big brother would always be there with the military capabilities. They use the money they saved on the defense cuts to support their social programs in Europe. So they go to the UN, they say, we need a no-fly zone, and oh, by the way, we don't have the force to do it, so let's get the Americans to do it. And we responded to it, and all that is doing is fueling this one world government. Okay, that's the first point. We're fueling the one world government. Second point is there are no good guys in Libya. And the very people that we are supporting with this no-fly zone are the same people we've been picking up in Iraq and Afghanistan as foreign fighters. And so to take sides in this thing, I think, is absolutely a mistake. But what it portends for Israel now is, even if the UN doesn't do a declaration of sovereignty for the Gaza Strip, what if the Palestinians now, in the Gaza Strip especially, you say the West Bank too, what if they now come into the United Nations and say, we need protection from these Israelis, we need a no-fly zone, because they keep bombing us, and they do. The Israelis are bombing them. And the reason the Israelis are bombing them is because they're firing rockets and missiles and killing Israeli citizens. So what are we going to do then? Well, I think, my personal view is this administration is inclined, because they just demonstrated this, they're inclined, more inclined than any other administration, to support that kind of requirement, because we've now established a precedent for supporting that. If, in fact, the UN unilaterally declares that Gaza, or the West Bank, or both, to be sovereign territory, then what that portends for every nation around the world is that at any point when you have a rebellious group, or you have a group that begins to claim sovereignty, as the Basque region in Spain, for example, the United Nations can declare that sovereign. The Bush administration made a terrible mistake, in my view, when they recognized Kosovo. Because what you essentially had is you had a rebellious group inside a sovereign nation that decided they wanted to be their own sovereign territory. And the Bush administration recognized them, and what we essentially did by doing that was we put a Muslim nation in the heart of Europe, and under the European Union rules, you go in there, you get into that nation, you can go anywhere in Europe once they become part of the EU, and that's the next step. Now, what does all that have to do with Israel? What that has to do with Israel is all of these precedents that are being set portend that ultimately Israel is going to have a huge problem with the Gaza Strip and the West Bank, which, by the way, don't ever forget that when you talk about peace talks with the Palestinians, you're only talking about the West Bank. You are not talking about Gaza, because they are not unified. And every time Abbas and the Fatah organization talk to Bibi Netanyahu about peace, which is all a farce to begin with, what happens in Gaza is they fire missiles and rockets over into Israel to disrupt these notional peace talks. Well, I see that where we're going right now with this administration, and by the way, we really have not had an Israeli-friendly administration since, in my view, Harry Truman. Reagan was probably the best, but every administration has squeezed them to divide covenant land. And we haven't had one. That's why I go back to what Alan said earlier. And I thought Mark Neville was the smartest guy I've ever seen, but now I've decided maybe he was. But what I think we have got to do, we've got to decide what are we looking for in the people that are going to govern this country. And I think one of the acid tests for them has to be, regardless of what level they're at, is where do you stand on Israel? Yes.